And Paul Kohler from VMware is going to give another talk around cloud. I think cloud is probably one of the hottest topics around the world today. And without further ado, I'll let you introduce yourself in a little bit, and please go ahead.
All right. Thank you very much, Joseph, and thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So I've got about half an hour to cover my my slides, and I've got about 50 slides to go through. So there's a lot of information to cover. I'll get through it probably around half an hour, and then you can ask questions. Feel free to ask questions during the presentation or at the end. So my responsibility at VMware is to handle the relationship between my company and IBM, and the technical relationship, all of the technical things that we have going on between the two companies. However, I'm going to try and cover various different aspects of the company. So I'm going to kind of give you an initial sort of real quick. Let's see if this works here. Yeah, not too well. But anyway, I'll cover VMware just briefly and some of the trends that are going on right now. I'll talk about the software-defined data center, which is a concept that we at VMware are really leading and is really sweeping through the industry. Some of the key components of some of the products that we have. Talk a little bit about end-user computing and VDI, and then finish up. Okay, so the VMware vision is really to empower people and organizations by radically simplifying IT through virtualization software. So, you know, we're really, we have been the virtualization leader, and that's good. However, with many of these business critical applications, it's reaching a point where, you know, the growth only has so much more to go. And so for VMware, strategically, we're looking for other avenues for growth, and we're widening our vision and the different areas and aspects that we focus on. And I'll talk about that right now. So yeah, so it's the company itself is about 4.6 billion in revenues last year. And of course, you know, we've got Fortune 500 customers, about 13,000 employees. We're based out of Palo Alto, so just down the road. We were founded not very long ago, so just like 15 years ago. And we're actually owned primarily by EMC. And EMC is, you know, of course, more a hardware-focused company, and we're more software. And we also have many of these other partners that are hardware vendors too. So it's an interesting sort of situation where our parent company is direct competitors with all of our primary partners. So, and I work with IBM. So it makes for sort of interesting and political situations. But at the end of the day, you know, we make it work. So we also have, as I mentioned, many partners, and then also service provider partners. So service provider partners can be of all sorts, shapes and stripes. We have a lot of cloud service provider partners, Rackspace, for example, and many others. So business, as I kind of alluded to earlier on, the business critical application momentum, like the percentages that have been virtualized, is continually increasing, but it's going to top out, right? And when we first started out, we primarily focused on development and development testing scenarios, and that's where virtualization was most popular. That was kind of the lower hanging fruit. And you know, now we're really focused on these business critical applications like Oracle and Microsoft and so on. And as you can see, the numbers continue to creep up, but they have a top end, right? So what we're really doing is driving through virtualization, and basically, traditionally, IT was very much, the applications were loaded on top of operating systems, which were loaded on top of servers, and so you're very sort of tied down to specific hardware. With virtualization, when you load the virtualization software, it basically pulls all of the servers together. So you want to have one single huge server on which you can then load the operating system and then all the applications. And so all of the resources, the memory, the CPU is all pooled together, right? So there's a lot more efficiency in terms of management and all of these other things, like the IT labor cost is far more efficient, the hardware maintenance, the downtime, the time to build and provision new applications, all of this is improved. And so you can see it's a natural way for organizations, IT organizations, but enterprises in general, businesses, to save a lot of money. So basically it's about abstracting from the hardware, pooling, and then automating it. So these are some of the different applications here. So say, for example, Windows, Linux, databases, mission critical, high performance computing, big data. No matter what the type of application it is, you can use the same principles. So, you know, what we've initially focused on is server abstraction and virtualization. But now what we're doing is we're moving into these other areas. So we're moving into storage. We're moving into networking is a big part. Also firewall and security, right? And then management. And so I'll talk about all of that in just a little bit. So a lot of this is helping drive cloud computing, because the more machines that you have, the more CPU resources that you have the need for, the more memory that you have the need for, the more that you can get efficiencies of size, right? And so, you know, for example, something as simple as when we all use, say, Gmail, Google Mail, right? We're all accessing the same cloud, right? And so it's Google's cloud. And by doing that, they have a lot more efficiency. And so virtualization has been a key component in being able to drive the cloud, the phenomenon and the popularity and the efficiency of cloud computing. And so, you know, cloud, of course, has really taken off. And for a long time, people thought that it was just hype at the beginning, right? Larry Ellison just thought it was just, you know, marketing hype. But it's not. It's you know, and it makes sense the more that you look at it. And so, of course, Oracle is jumping on board now also. So private clouds are like when the enterprise itself has their own data center and they have their own cloud internally for their own users, their own employees, right? And then the same concept applies also to the public cloud. And then you have what we call hybrid clouds, so applications that can seamlessly move from a private cloud to the public cloud, right? So there are certain benefits both for the people in terms of consistent access to applications and data, the separation of your personal versus business in terms of security, the choice of any device. So if you're using a PDA or a tablet or a PC or a laptop, you name it. And then for IT, it becomes a lot easier for IT departments to manage it also. So these are the three main, for VMware, these are the three main strategic priorities right now for the company. So it's a software-defined data center is one of them, and I'll talk about that in a second. Workforce mobility, so that's more like end-user computing and VDI. And then also hybrid cloud. Those are the primary strategic priorities. So now I'm going to talk about the software-defined data center. So what we've done here is gone from, you know, if we look in the bigger picture, we've gone from mainframe to PC client server, and now using virtualization, you can pool all the resources like I told you about, which opens up the opportunities for cloud. So, you know, with workloads doubling, and workloads is like tasks that computers have to and applications have to process, right? The amount of processing and demands of consumers and employees and everyone is just continually increasing, right? Basically, the more that we leverage technology, the more that we use internet, the more that we use the cloud, these demands are increasing. And so how do enterprises and cloud companies, how do we keep up? Well, the way that we keep up is increased efficiency, right? So we have to have solutions that are going to be able to handle more workloads in a more efficient and effective way. And this is a graph expressing some of that. So you can see here the number of physical servers has stayed pretty consistent, pretty flat, right? However, the number of virtual machines that are being loaded is increasing. So basically, even though the servers aren't increasing, it's allowed IT and companies, enterprise companies, to support more and more workload demands, right? And also what's happening here with virtualization is that effectively what's happening is the server manufacturers, they have less and less ability, unfortunately for them, to differentiate themselves from each other, right? Because they are not providing a shrink-wrap solution with the operating system and customization. They have to adhere to certain standards. And so the prices, the margins and the cost for servers have come down, which saves customers more money, right? And more of the money is going towards software, so virtualization software, application software, and so on. And this is a phenomenon for servers, but if this same thing gets applied to, say, networking hardware, you know, we'll see a similar sort of trend, and the same thing for storage hardware too. Okay, so you know, in terms of virtualization, so there's a few trends here. So the cost per VM hour is continually coming down through standardization and pooling, and then the additional thing is automation. So by using management and automation, you can also further bring those costs down and increase the efficiencies. I don't know what happened here to this. Oh, this is, I know what happened to this slide. So I put this on PDF, so this is why this animated slide doesn't work. But it's okay. The principle here is very simple, is that in the past, it was very hardware focused, and IT departments had to spend an awful lot of time just assembling servers, installing the operating system, installing the applications, monitoring it. If there was a problem with that server, quickly pull that data and pull the applications and the users over to other servers. Whereas all of that happens seamlessly. If the hardware starts failing now, it just gets moved automatically. Okay, so really what we're doing here, as I mentioned earlier with VMware, is that we focused on the compute layer, which is the server layer, and now we're going into storage, networking, security, and then across all of those, management is required too. So recently what we've done here is our traditional product at VMware was our vSphere software product, which is just simply virtualization software right here that gets installed on the server. But because of the demands of the market, and then also wisely because of some of the trends that I was talking about, the need to address networking, the need to address storage, the need to address management, we're now bundling our software, and we're addressing all of these different components and bundling the software into one single product. And then in addition to that, what we've done, so we have this vCloud suite right here that I just showed you, but we also made an acquisition late last year for about 150 million, this company called Dynamic Ops, which we've now renamed as vCloud Automation Center. And that can sit on top of vCloud suite, or it could also equally sit on top of many of our competitors, right? So on KVM or Citrix or Microsoft Hyper-V. So basically it gives that flexibility where if you have workloads and applications and data sitting in another cloud, you can seamlessly automate it and manage it across different clouds, right? So vSphere is, as I mentioned, the key component, the core component of where VMware came from. And you know, as I mentioned earlier, it was all tied previously to a single server, and now by loading virtualization software, you can now have these VMs, virtual machines, and have these on each virtual machine. You have your separate OS and application. Is that a question? Go for it. So to move it seamlessly, yeah. So that you'd use vMotion to move it seamlessly across from one VM to another. If I'm understanding your question. Yes. 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 Yeah. Yeah. I'm not. You know, we'll have to. I'll take your question after at the end, and we'll talk about it some more. But it may be vMotion, but I'm not sure. We'll have to discuss it. You know, some more. All right. So clustering in a similar way, just clustering your VMs across machines using vSphere. And I just mentioned this vMotion. So like if you have an outage on one particular data center or with one particular VM, it will automatically seamlessly move it across. And so there'll be no downtime, you know, and you have fault tolerance and so on. And then of course IT can address the hardware issue, but you know, effectively the application, the user, the workload isn't having any downtime. So these resource pools, as I mentioned, they apply to like CPUs, to memory, to storage, and connectivity also. So high availability, as I already mentioned, is addressed with the software. And you know, in terms of the different segments and applications and workloads that we addressed, initially web servers and DHCP servers, dev test were some of the earlier lower hanging fruit that we addressed. And then as time went on, we're increasingly addressing business critical applications. And enterprises are now much more comfortable running virtualization software for their business critical applications. And so it's pretty standard now to do that. And with each release of our software, we increase the capabilities and the scalability of our software. And so, you know, with each one, we can scale up to bigger and bigger numbers. And we're, of course, always pushing the envelope. So vCloud and security, VCNS. So this is another key component. So late last year, we also made another acquisition of a company called Nicira for actually over $1 billion. And so this kind of opened the door for us very much so in the networking industry. And so, you know, even though traditionally, as I mentioned with vSphere, you use virtualization on your servers, the same wasn't being applied necessarily to networking. But you know, and by having this chain here in this slide, you can see that for the most part, you are tethered to your physical network. By using like Nicira and VXLANs and certain key technology, you're also able to virtualize the network layer. This slide also didn't come through for PDF, but so. You know, the players that we've traditionally worked with on the server side, so like, say, Dell, HP, IBM, Quanta, and so on, the players are different, of course, on the networking side. So now we're working a lot with Arista and Cisco and HP, believe it or not, and Juniper and so on. So we both partner with these companies. It's kind of a strange situation where we partner with these companies and we also compete. Security. So security allows you to, you know, there are other components also that allow you to segment by VMs and also by workloads and applications, the particular security parameters and security profiles that are assigned to those particular users, applications, and workloads. So on the management side, this applies to vSphere and then across networking, across all the layers, really. So traditionally with management, as you see, you had management applications and features specifically for each individual hardware layer. And so there's a lot of different data to process and alarms to track. However, what we've tried to do is bring that up a level. So you're managing and you're monitoring the availability and these key statistics based on workloads, applications, users, so at a higher layer. And so getting a better feel for what's the end user experience. And as you can tell, like when you think of all the different components that go into delivering, workload, there are so many different components to actually monitor. And traditionally, we've taken it from that approach from each individual component, right, in terms of management. However, at the end of the day, what the customer experience is and what the user experience is, the application experience is really what we're trying to do with our management software. Yeah. 3 minutes? Okay. All right. So just moving along quickly. Let me just skip along. So this is just one slide of the vCloud Automation Center, which is the dynamic ops component that sits on top of everything. And that's more focused on automation and high-level management. And then also we have, if I go back here, VMware Horizon is our new suite that we bundled, that is for end-user computing and VDI solutions. And so, so this is it. It basically combines Horizon View, Horizon Mirage, and Horizon Workspace. Horizon Workspace is targeted at multi-devices, and then Horizon View and Mirage are more for the IT department to actually manage. So why VMware? In summary, to minimize the total cost of ownership, to build for the future, to address both the IT departments, but also the users, and drive down costs, and also maximize uptime. And it isn't just a slide where we've actually been able to execute on this over a period of time, and so we're hopeful that we can do it, but in these new areas of networking and storage and so on. So the net result is increased efficiency, agility, control, without sacrificing any choice. All right, there we go. So. Sure. Yeah, sure. Any questions? Yes. So the question is, when you do virtualization, the processing speed becomes lower. Yeah, there's when you load, that's correct. I mean, when you load virtualization software, there's increased overhead, understandably, right? But when you pool the resources, the hope is that the net effect in the bigger picture is actually increase in efficiency. But if you did, let's say if you just had one single server and then you loaded virtualization software and so on, just on one single server, you're right, that there would be increased overhead, and therefore, yeah. Well, so what is the optimum condition for virtualization? Well, yeah. So in principle, the optimum condition is the more number of units, the better. And then, keep in mind, I showed one slide that showed you that the maximum number of units in terms of memory, number of CPUs, and so on is a fixed parameter. And we try to up those numbers continually, right? So you get the maximum efficiency when you reach the ceilings. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, if anyone has some additional questions, feel free to come up afterwards. Yes.
Yeah, I have a technical question on this. When you vMotion.
Yes.
And the vMotion, when you move from one machine to another machine.
Yes.
How do you know that this machine is down so that VM can move to the other one? Are you had to be in the all same cluster, or they can be in different cluster?
Yeah, good question. So with the vMotion, well, you heard it. Yeah, so the vMotion actually initially could only work within the same cluster. But now we've also increased the technology so you can go across from data center to data center. So we currently support that. Actually, I think it was in 5.1 is when it came out. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah. How is the workload distributed? Yeah. There's a number of different parameters, and it depends on the profiles in which you set within the software in terms of like how it's distributed. You know, and what we try to do is segment the applications and the workloads by like sort of a platinum, gold, silver, bronze methodology, and then depending upon the infrastructure and what the parameters can offer, like in terms of, let's say you can put the bronze on the cheaper, less reliable hardware, and then you take the premium, you know, the platinum level applications and workloads, and you tend to direct it to the higher availability and better performing hardware. Well, it's done automatically, but it requires you to manually, as the administrator, to make sure that you configure your parameters correctly, like configure the parameters for the hardware, and then also for the applications and workloads. So, in other words, if you set it up correctly, it should work fine. You know, of course, with all software, there's always some bugs in there, but hopefully, for the most part, yeah, it does work. Yeah.
Paul, you're going to be available after your
yeah,
reception?
sure.
So, please give a
thank you.
to Paul's presentation.